The ER smelled like antiseptic and rain-soaked coats. Monitors blinked soft green, a steady metronome against the storm outside. He arrived grey-lipped, pulse thready, pupils dull as pennies. "He's slipping," someone muttered. A cold hush spread, like the room itself braced for impact. I counted breaths, heard 3, then 2, and then only the wind. The first silence felt final, almost. Family pressed the glass, fingers leaving fog ghosts on the pane. The chief resident lifted his eyes toward the clock, ready to mark the moment. A printer spat out labs with a cruel rattle. Acidosis, rising potassium, a heart too tired to argue. We stabilized, lost ground, stabilized again, like standing on wet gravel. One more tremor and everything might give way. His EKG began to widen, QRS stretching like a yawn before sleep. The room thinned to essentials, epinephrine, pads, compressions measured by breath counts and aching shoulders. I tasted copper on my tongue, adrenaline souring the air. "Another round," I said, though my voice felt borrowed. The line wavered, then steadied into something worse, certainty gathering like thunder. The attending's pen hovered above the chart, the number ready, the ink patient. We had followed the book with almost religious precision, each step like a rung on a ladder descending through darkness. Still, the rhythm stuttered toward the abyss. "Prepare to call it," someone whispered. The word time floated up, weightless and brutal, daring us to let it land. Then the monitor flicked, a single narrow spike, a staccato protest against the void. No one breathed. A second spike chased the first, thin but undeniable, like a match in a cave. "Wait," I said, feeling heat crawl back into my hands. The attending's pen froze. What rose next would force every prediction to bend, hard. What happened next would challenge everything medicine thought it knew. We didn't expect a miracle. The case seemed written before we turned the first page. Multi-organ strain, refractory arrhythmia, labs tilting toward disaster. The team saw the signs we're trained to fear, numbers that speak in low, inevitable tones. It was the kind of night when medicine feels like steering on ice, hands steady, heart sinking, every correction too small, too late. He was a 47-year-old warehouse supervisor, ordinary on paper, extraordinary in the insistence of those who loved him. A dad who fixed bikes on Saturdays and burned pancakes on Sundays. Hypertension, recent flu, a week of fatigue he'd shrugged off. He joked on arrival, thin humor, sweaty forehead, until the joke dissolved into the quicksand of IV tubing and sticky leads. The setting tightened like a lens, fluorescent hum, saline hiss, the drum of distant thunder against steel vents. Under the harsh lights his skin looked waxy, then flushed, then waxy again, a tide we couldn't time. Nurses moved in choreography. Pads, meds, compressions, each motion ending in a glance at the monitor, as if the screen might confess before the body did. Here's a fact that unsettles even seasoned clinicians. In rare conditions around the moment of death and attempted resuscitation, the body can spring back with an unexpected rhythm after a pause. The so-called Lazarus phenomenon. It's controversial, uncommon, and easily misunderstood. But cases exist, challenging tidy borders. We didn't say that aloud then. Superstition and science both prefer silence in storms. Our angle tonight isn't just survival, it's the moment prediction fails. The charts were confident, the human beneath them, stubborn. We'll follow the clues that hid in plain sight. The lab that seemed trivial, the symptom that read like a typo. And we'll stay with the people who refused to look away when the numbers said stop, because sometimes numbers blink first. It began quietly, the way storms sometimes do, not with thunder but with the silence before. He had complained of fatigue that week, brushing it off as leftover flu. At work, colleagues noticed he leaned against crates a little longer, his breath coming shorter. At home, his children teased him for dozing on the couch before dinner. Yet beneath the ordinary tiredness lurked a rhythm going wrong, a pulse that whispered betrayal. When he arrived at the ER, the story looked straightforward. Chest discomfort, dizziness, sweat soaking through his shirt. The triage nurse noted a rapid, irregular beat, one of those pulses you feel before you hear. He tried to joke about working too hard, but his words came slow, lips pale, humor thinned by the effort of standing. His wife's eyes darted to the monitor, hoping for reassurance it could not give. The initial exam painted a picture darker than his smile. Oxygen saturation dipped, blood pressure sagged like a rope under strain. An EKG snapped out of the printer, black ink scratching across the page. Widened QRS, runs of ventricular tachycardia threatening to spiral. The technician glanced at the strip, then at the physician, and didn't need to say a word. Machines have their own language, and this one screamed. Blood work arrived, cruelly confirming what the eyes already suspected. Potassium spiking above safe thresholds, acidosis creeping through the body like fog. "He's unstable," the resident muttered, already ordering a flurry of interventions. Calcium, insulin with dextrose, oxygen, fluids. Every move felt like plugging holes in a dam built of paper, and still the numbers bled through, refusing to obey. His first collapse came sudden. One moment he sat upright, the next he slumped sideways, skin ashen, monitor shrieking a deadly chorus. Compressions began, sharp thuds echoing against ribs. Epinephrine pushed, electricity applied, bodies working in rhythm to drag him back. For a heartbeat, literally, he returned, eyes fluttering, pulse faint but present. But the reprieve felt fragile, like a candle in wind. Doctors huddled, debating causes. Viral myocarditis, electrolyte storm, a hidden congenital channelopathy. Each theory explained pieces, none the whole. His chest rose and fell under the mask, shallow, mechanical, every breath borrowed. "This is refractory," the attending said, voice heavy. Prognosis formed in the silence that followed, hours at best. Charts became grim prophecies, lines trending only one way, down. Yet there were clues we didn't see clearly enough. That morning's flu-like fatigue, the nagging cough weeks earlier, the minor lab anomaly filed as non-specific. Hindsight would later circle them in red ink, accusing us of blindness. In real time, they blurred into the chaos of vitals and alarms. The pattern existed, but like constellations, only visible when distance forced the shape. By the end of that hour, the diagnosis was both precise and brutal. Acute fulminant heart failure, electrical instability unresponsive to standard care. The word terminal hovered unspoken, though everyone heard it. Prognosis was set down in ink, as inevitable as gravity. What no one dared predict was that ink once dry could smear, that the story wasn't finished. The doctors thought they had seen everything. They were wrong. The first hour had felt like balancing on a cliff edge. The second was the fall. His blood pressure dropped further, digits shrinking on the monitor as if numbers themselves were fading. Nurses tightened IV lines, swapped empty syringes for full, yet the fluids seemed to vanish into a void. Each intervention ended with the same cruel punctuation, alarms beeping, rhythms stuttering, the body refusing to cooperate. The family had been escorted closer now, their eyes wide, watching through glass. His daughter's palms pressed against the window, trembling. "Is he going to be okay?" she whispered, though the pain carried no sound. Inside, we worked under fluorescent glare, sweat collecting under gowns. Every glance toward the waiting faces carried its own weight. Hope against science, fear against truth. Ventricular fibrillation struck next, a chaotic storm of impulses. The heart quivered instead of pumping like a bird trapped in wire. "Charge! 200 joules!" The defibrillator pads pressed, gel smeared, shock delivered. His body lifted and fell with brutal precision. For a split second, flat silence. Then a flicker, narrow complex, weak but there. Cheers didn't come. Everyone knew this was a rhythm borrowed, not earned. Complications cascaded, lungs filling with fluid, oxygen exchange failing, blood gas showing drowning from within. Intubation followed, Tube slid past cords, ventilator hissing life where lungs could not. His chest rose mechanically, a puppet pulled by unseen strings. Even with perfect settings, his oxygen saturation hovered dangerously low, digits glowing red like warnings we couldn't ignore. Another lab arrived, lactate climbing, a cruel sign of tissues starving. "We're losing perfusion," someone said, though no one needed the reminder. His skin turned mottled, dusky patterns blooming like bruises across arms and legs. Fingers chilled, capillary refill vanishing. The body's map of circulation rewrote itself, prioritizing survival in cruel arithmetic, brain and heart at the cost of extremities. Dialogue punctured the hum of machines. "He won't make the night," one resident whispered. "Don't say that," another snapped, though their eyes betrayed the same fear. The attending stood silent, lips pressed thin, chart in hand. Prognosis wasn't just a word anymore. It was a gravity pulling every thought toward the inevitable. And yet, some invisible tether kept hands moving, refusing surrender. Science demanded explanations. Could this be viral myocarditis triggered by the flu he brushed off? The pattern fit: sudden inflammation, arrhythmias, collapse. But viral myocarditis rarely reversed once this advanced. Another theory, electrolyte catastrophe from a silent kidney failure, seemed plausible. Potassium levels argued yes, but not convincingly enough. The truth remained clouded, hidden in the storm of failing organs. Hours blurred. Code Blue repeated 3 more times, each resuscitation slower, shoulders heavier, hope thinner. Epinephrine doses stacked like unanswered prayers, his chart filled with timestamps of collapse and return, collapse and return. Each revival carved a deeper trench of exhaustion into the team. Still, the daughter's face outside reminded us surrender wasn't ours to declare. Midnight brought a fragile lull. Vitals flatlined into fragile stability, heart beating like a drum with a torn skin. Irregular, weak, but audible. He lay surrounded by tubing, machines pulsing in place of muscles. We leaned back, sweat cooling on necks, the silence unnerving. No one trusted the numbers. We had been fooled before. Just when fatigue tempted complacency, a new alarm shrieked. Blood pressure plummeted, oxygen saturation dove, the monitor flashing red warnings. "He's crashing again," shouted the nurse. We rushed forward, hands flying, hearts pounding. The doctors thought the night's worst had passed. But the storm was not done. Its most violent strike had yet to come. The crash hit like a trapdoor. Numbers plunged, pressure, oxygen, the thin line between chaos and silence. "Start compressions!" The room snapped into the choreography we knew too well. Yet something felt off, like a wrong note inside a familiar song. The ventilator screamed high pressures, the chest rose unevenly, the right side lagging, almost stubborn. I filed it as fatigue, then as lighting, then as nothing. The body, meanwhile, was making a case we weren't hearing. We cycled epinephrine, calcium, insulin, dextrose again, the usual constellation around hyperkalemia and myocarditis. The EKG widened, but not consistently. Intervals yawned and snapped back like a rubber band. "Why are PIPs this high?" the respiratory therapist asked, eyes darting to the ventilator. Peak inspiratory pressures shouldn't have been climbing this fast. Crackles suggested fluid, yes, but the asymmetry nagged. His neck veins looked fuller than before. I told myself it was the angle. It wasn't. "Hold," I said. We paused long enough to remap our assumptions. Ultrasound slid across his chest, gelled cold, probe steady. On the left, shimmering lung sliding comet tails. On the right, stillness, no sliding, just a frozen horizon. The screen was a quiet indictment. "Absent right-sided lung sliding," the resident reported, voice tightening. The room inhaled as one. Positive pressure, repeated shocks, brittle lungs after a week of cough. Suddenly, the puzzle aligned. Attention pneumothorax hiding under the thunder. It made brutal sense. The rising ventilator pressures, the mottled skin, the stubborn hypertension that mocked our drips. Each clue had been waving from the periphery. We'd read pulmonary edema and myocarditis so loudly that air-trapping catastrophe never got a line. "Needle now," the attending said. We prepped the right chest, second intercostal space, mid-clavicular, a clean stab of intention through skin and doubt. The catheter slid in. Then came the sound, a hiss, long and relieved, as if the room exhaled with him. The monitor answered before anyone could speak. Blood pressure climbed, not triumphantly, but with a weary determination. QRS complexes narrowed, the cruel widening retreating like a tide. Oxygen saturation crept into safer ground. We exchanged looks that bordered on superstitious. "We've got to place a chest tube," I said, already gloving. The tube advanced at the 5th intercostal space, anterior axillary line. A bloom of air bubbled through the water seal, proof that our phantom had a body after all. "How'd we miss it?" the intern whispered, guilty and grateful at once. "We didn't," the attending replied, eyes soft. "We misranked it. We had a list stacked by probability. The solution lived lower on the ladder until the body shoved it up. With the right lung re-expanding, pressures normalized. Lactate remained high, but its climb halted, like a mountaineer found a ledge. The heart's rhythm surrendered its tantrum. For the first time all night, the room smelled like victory instead of fear. We scrubbed the record with hindsight. The cough weeks earlier, maybe minor bully. CPR and high PEEP, risky in inflamed friable tissue. The non-specific lab, an elevated D-dimer that hadn't fully fit our initial picture, hinting at strain we hadn't centered. We'd chased myocarditis, managed potassium, intubated for edema, all necessary, none sufficient. One hidden pocket of air had been strangling the circulation. Sometimes the smallest leak in the system steals the loudest breath. As we tightened connections and retaped lines, his color warmed from wax to clay to human. The daughter's face, still at the window, shifted from stunned to searching to cautiously bright. I stepped out. "We found something fixable," I said. She didn't ask what. She just sagged into the chair, relief cracking her posture. Back inside, we weaned the drips a notch, watched numbers hold. The ventilator's angry beep softened to a metronome. With the chest tube draining, perfusion returned to places the body had abandoned hours ago. A gentle flush touched his fingertips. The capillary refill answered with color. The EKG, once a haunted house, now read like a recovery plan. "He might declare himself," the attending said, our quiet code for an unexpected rally. We had prepared to document an ending. Instead, the story swiveled. The doctors thought prediction was the map. Tonight, the patient was the compass. The relief after the chest tube was like surfacing from deep water, but it didn't last. Stabilization bought us time, not safety. His heart rhythm still stumbled, trotting unevenly between sinus and ectopy, threatening collapse again. Blood gases improved, yet lactate clung high, a stubborn shadow. "We fixed the pressure," the attending muttered, "but not the storm." The question lingered. How much more could his body withstand before the next spiral? At 2 a.m., a new challenge declared itself. His kidneys stopped producing urine, monitors showing output like a dry well. Creatinine climbed, potassium threatened another surge. Dialysis was the logical step, but moving him to another unit felt reckless. One bump, one delay, and the fragile balance could crumble. CRRT here, the nephrologist suggested. Continuous renal replacement therapy. Portable, invasive, risky. Yet waiting meant toxins would finish what the arrhythmias had started. Debate sharpened. "He won't tolerate anticoagulation," one resident argued. "He won't tolerate not getting it," another shot back. The attending finally cut through. "Set it up." Blood tubing unfurled like red veins across the room. The machine hummed to life, sipping his blood, filtering, returning. It was medicine's quiet gamble, trusting technology to do what organs refused. Each dial click echoed like a countdown against mortality itself. But complications never come alone. Hours into dialysis, his blood pressure sank again, MAPS dropping below 60. Nurses titrated norepinephrine, then vasopressin. His vessels resisted, stubbornly slack. "We're maxed out," someone whispered. A balloon pump was mentioned, an intra-aortic counterpulsation device. Old school, risky, rarely first choice. Yet desperate times strip algorithms bare. "Get it," the attending ordered. The decision felt surgical, decisive, terrifying. Insertion was a theater of silence. The catheter advanced through the femoral artery, guided upward, stopping near the heart. Each inflation synchronized with diastole, each deflation with systole, a dance of pressure and timing. Almost immediately, his blood pressure climbed, not soaring but steadying, like a bridge rebuilt under rushing water. The room exhaled. For the first time, numbers and physiology agreed on a truce. Dialogue fractured the tension. "We're throwing everything at him," the intern whispered, almost apologetic. "And he's throwing it back," I replied, watching his rhythm settle. It wasn't triumph, not yet, but each intervention was a thread, and together they began to weave something stronger than prognosis, the possibility of survival. Still, cliffhangers hovered. If the balloon shifted, if dialysis clotted, if infection seeded, victory could unravel in a blink. Science explained the mechanics, but the air held more than mechanics. Families prayed in the hall. Nurses shared silent nods between compressions of care. One whispered miracle under her breath, as if naming it might anchor it. And still, we reminded ourselves, this was physiology in motion, not magic. Yet in moments like these, the line blurred. Sometimes medicine feels less like science and more like listening to a body whisper its demands. By dawn, the storm calmed, presses down a notch, dialysis cycling smoothly, balloon pump thumping in harmony with his heart. His skin warmed, urine trickled at last, color flushing his face. The monitors no longer screamed. They pulsed, steady, alive. We had crossed into territory where the word impossible began to wobble. Still, a cliffhanger remained. Survival wasn't enough. Recovery meant waking, breathing, remembering, and no one yet knew if his brain had followed him back. As sunlight bled through blinds, the team slumped against walls, exhaustion battling relief. Prognosis notes scratched at midnight now looked outdated, almost arrogant. "So, what's next?" the daughter asked softly when I stepped out. I hesitated, choosing truth over certainty. "Next," I said, "we see if he decides to stay." Inside, monitors blinked steady, the patient's chest rising like a tide. The doctors thought the worst had passed, but the most shocking moment still waited at the horizon. Morning light often exposes truth medicine tries to hide. By 7 a.m., his monitors hummed with an uneasy steadiness. Sinus rhythm irregular but present. Pressure supported yet holding. Oxygenation slowly improving. The ICU felt less like a battlefield and more like a waiting room. We had pulled him from the edge, but was he merely suspended or truly walking back toward us? The team gathered around, exhaustion painting dark circles under eyes. We whispered vitals like prayers, heart rate, oxygen, urine output. Each number was fragile, conditional. The balloon pump still pulsed at his side. Dialysis continued, tubes webbed across his body. He lay still, eyelids fluttering with faint tremors. "Neurological exam?" someone asked. We braced for the possibility of silence, of absence behind his gaze. Pupils constricted, sluggish but reactive. A hand squeezed faintly when prompted, once, twice. The nurse gasped, then repeated the command. Another squeeze. Small, imperfect, but undeniable. The daughter, outside the glass, pressed both hands to her mouth, tears carving tracks down her cheeks. Science would call it purposeful movement. The family called it hope. Over the next hours, sedation lifted like fog. He blinked, attempted words that tangled in the ventilator tube. His chest rose with mechanical rhythm, but his eyes darted, alive, demanding explanation. We leaned close. "You're in the ICU. You're alive. You fought." He frowned, then relaxed, as if his body already knew what words struggled to deliver. Complications lingered, of course. Infection threatened, kidneys teetered, weakness shadowed every muscle. But his brain, his story, remained intact. Rehabilitation began almost immediately. Tilt beds, breathing trials, speech therapy. Each milestone felt monumental. Sitting upright for 2 minutes, whispering his daughter's name around the tube, sipping water without choking. Simple acts, each more defiant than statistics had allowed. Dialogue marked his return. "They said you wouldn't make it," the daughter told him, voice quivering. He smiled faintly, lips cracked, then rasped. They were wrong. The room froze. Even the machines seemed to pause. Words we had dreaded now returned as miracle. Sometimes survival sounds less like a heartbeat and more like a whisper that refuses to die. Reflection crept in among the science. The missed diagnosis of pneumothorax, the controversial use of balloon pump, the gamble of CRRT, all stacked into a tower of improbability. Yet here he was, proof that failure isn't always final. Medicine teaches us humility, but patience teaches astonishment. The doctors saw death coming, prepared to write it down, and still the ending shocked them all. Weeks later, he walked, slowly, shakily but upright, out of the hospital. Cameras of memory captured every step, IV pole trailing, family cheering, nurses applauding softly. Prognosis had called it terminal, life had called it temporary. "I don't remember the darkness," he admitted later. "I remember waking up and everyone crying. That's how I knew I mattered." For us, the case became a parable whispered in hallways. Never trust certainty, never ignore small clues, never assume the book has the last word. For his family, it became a celebration. Birthdays, breakfasts, quiet moments magnified. Medicine had witnessed a resurrection not measured in statistics, but in laughter restored. And as I closed the chart, one thought lingered. The miracle wasn't in beating death, but in reminding us that life sometimes waits until the last second to turn the page. The doctors thought they had seen everything. They were wrong. This case reminded us that medicine is never absolute. Prognoses, charts, and algorithms all pointed to the end, yet a fragile spark kept pushing against certainty. From the tension pneumothorax hidden in plain sight to the desperate decision for dialysis and balloon support, every detail became part of a fight that statistics said he couldn't win. But survival is not always a number, it is persistence made visible. His recovery wasn't just a medical victory. It was a human story of resilience, of a family who refused to leave the glass window, of a patient who whispered they were wrong when the world expected silence. Science explained the mechanics, but hope gave them meaning. Sometimes the miracle isn't avoiding death, it's discovering that life can rise again where no one believed it would. Now I turn to you. What do you think really saved this patient's life? Science or fate? Share your thoughts in the comments. And stay with us, because in our next story, you'll meet a patient whose laughter nearly became deadly. You won't want to miss the shocking twist waiting there.